Frank, try the salad and canapes. Don't be shy, Stephanie said, pushing the plate of red caviar canapes closer to the guy, for he was an important guest. Thank you. Everything is very delicious, the young guy said with a smile and took another chop. We should celebrate such news. Alex rubbed his hands together and took out a bottle of expensive whiskey from the bar. I kept this bottle for a special occasion. Finally, I can open it. Tonight, we should drink it and celebrate meeting our son-in-law. The man muttered and began pouring whiskey into glasses. Frank covered his glass with his hand and shook his head negatively. Dad, Frank is not your son-in-law yet, and he doesn't drink alcohol. I told you, Stacy said with a frown. Alex shrugged and asked, doesn't drink at all. Did you have a drinking problem? The man asked sadly. No, I'm just an athlete, Frank replied with a smile. I've been boxing since I was 7 years old, and I go to the gym a few times a week. I don't drink alcohol. Sorry, Alex exhaled in relief. Well, if you're an athlete, then of course you shouldn't drink. I respect that. The dinner was going great, and Stacy's parents liked Frank. Frank and Stacy met at work. The man was an administrator in a company where a newly graduated girl came for a job interview. He offered to help her with work matters and became her mentor. This help turned into friendship and then developed into mutual sympathy and love. They started dating. It turned out they had a lot in common. They both liked to travel and listen to the same music, preferred outdoor activities instead of lying on the couch all day, and believed in love at first sight. Frank and Stacy decided to live together after 6 months of their relationship. They were sure that their relationship was already strong enough, and they were ready for a life together. Their feelings didn't deceive them. It was comfortable to live together. Frank always helped Stacy with household chores. He didn't divide responsibilities into male and female. When a guy got home before his girlfriend, he always cooked dinner and cleaned the apartment. Stacy would do the same if she came home earlier than her boyfriend. They decided together how they would spend their weekends, and, at least once a month, they would go on a little trip to new places. They had even traveled abroad together. Stacy's parents have long asked their daughter to introduce them to her boyfriend because young people already lived together. Now it was time for Stacy and Frank to meet each other's parents because the couple was already planning to get married. Stacy warned her parents that today she would come for dinner together with Frank. Stephanie and Alex made a delicious dinner and welcomed their future son-in-law warmly. Stacy was their only daughter, and they really cared about her future. Stacy, Frank seems like a decent guy. He doesn't even drink alcohol. That's uncommon nowadays. Are you sure he didn't have a drinking problem? Alex asked with a squint. Dad, you know that Frank is an athlete, and he enjoys an active lifestyle very much. He's against any alcohol, said Stacy confidently. Well, okay, you know him better than me. It's great that he works out. And the most important thing is that he loves you. For parents, that's the most important thing. By the way, what can you tell me about his parents? I don't know, the girl said quietly. I haven't met them yet. What do you mean you haven't met them? Stephanie, who had not interfered in the conversation between father and daughter before, asked. Do you know anything at all about his family? Well, Frank never talks about them, Stacy said with a sigh. All I know is that he came from some small town in a neighboring state, but he only went there once since we've been living together. He came back from his hometown upset, but he wouldn't tell me what happened there. He just asked me not to worry. I also know he's not the only child in the family, but I don't know anyone. That's very suspicious, Stephanie said with a frown. I'm sure he's hiding something, but Alex calmed her down. I'm sure he's not hiding anything. He's just a guy from a small town. I guess his parents are poor people, especially since they have many children. That's why he's embarrassed to introduce you to his family. Stacy, you were born into a wealthy family, and he had to achieve everything on his own. Don't try to look for secrets where there are none. And don't bother the guy with questions. I guess you're right, Stephanie said softly. Stacy and Frank continued to live happily together. The girl no longer insisted on meeting his relatives. After another 6 months, they decided to get married. Stacy, but I don't want expensive restaurants and limousines, Frank said. If you don't mind, let's use the money for a wedding trip. And we also need to think about our own house. Okay, my love, the girl agreed. I don't see the point of having a lavish party. Either let's have a nice family dinner instead of a noisy party, and invite parents and close friends. Of course, be sure to invite your parents, the guy said with a smile. But my parents won't be able to come. Sorry, Frank said, turning away. Your parents can't even come to their son's wedding? Stacy asked in surprise, looking at her future husband. But you haven't told them anything yet. We don't even know the wedding date yet. Are you sure they can't come? I'm sure. Are we going to have dinner today or what? Frank asked, trying to change the topic of conversation. Stacy felt anxious. She realized that something was wrong. Frank was not the kind of man who would be embarrassed to introduce his girlfriend to his poor family. Stacy, relax, Dad's right. He's just not ready to bring his poor family to the big city yet. Mom tried to calm her down. But Mom, how can we celebrate a wedding without his parents? I mean, it's not right. Frank can't do that to his family. Stacy sighed. I think your decision about the modest dinner is wrong, Alex exclaimed, peering into the kitchen where Mom and Stacy were talking. You're our only daughter, and we want to throw a fancy party. Invite all the relatives to an expensive restaurant, and buy you a fancy wedding dress. Don't worry, we can pay for it without Frank's parents. I realize they're in a difficult financial situation, but I want my daughter to have a beautiful wedding. The kind of wedding you dream of. Dad, I'd like to buy a beautiful wedding dress too, and choose an expensive restaurant, and pot fresh flowers everywhere. But Frank is against it. I don't want to argue with him about it. It's not only my wedding, it's his too. Exactly, it's your wedding, Stephanie intervened. Frank has to take into account what you want as well. If he loves you, he'll understand. After all, a wedding only happens once in your life. Well, actually, a wedding can happen 2 or 3 times in a life if necessary, Dad said with a laugh. And now listen to me. Mom and I will pay for the restaurant and for everything else. Your job is to prepare your future husband for such a celebration of your wedding. And tell us the date of the wedding. Stacy smiled and hugged her parents. After all, she was their only daughter, and she was used to them fulfilling all her requests and whims. Stacy, I'm going on a business trip for a couple of days. Do you want to come with me? Frank asked, coming home early. They had already practiced this when Frank went on a business trip to another city. He took Stacy with him. After work, they would explore the local sites, work around the city, and go to theaters and museums. You know, my love, I have no desire to go anywhere this time, especially since you and I have visited this city recently. And there's no point because you'll be busy with work. I don't want to work around the city alone. I'd rather stay home and get the reports done before the end of the month. Okay, no problem. I'll miss you, the guy said with a smile. Frank left early in the morning. Stacy took the day off and left the apartment right after she saw her fiancé off on a business trip. He called a cab and left for the train station, and Stacy went on a little trip to a neighboring state by car. It took her over 4 hours to get there. The girl had checked Frank's home address in his passport beforehand and found out where his parents lived. She pulled into a small town by a lake and stopped. The town looked abandoned. Half of the houses were destroyed, and the territories were overgrown with weeds. Stacy couldn't find the street names on the buildings, but on one of the streets, she saw a store with a shabby, crooked sign. The door was open, but there were no people there. The girl entered the store and saw a woman in her 40s working there. She had bright red lipstick on her lips, dark eyeshadow on her eyelids, and messy curly hair. There were not many goods in the store, some sausage in the fridge, and canned goods on the shelves. but there was a lot of cheap alcohol. There was no doubt about the preferences of the local inhabitants. "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to this street?" Stacy asked the woman and showed her the address. "Are you here to see Karen? You need to turn left behind the store and go down the street." "Why are you looking for her?" the woman asked with a squint. Probably she wanted to talk to someone because the woman was very bored in that store without customers. "That's my fiancé's mother. I just need to talk to her," Stacy said briefly. "Do you want to talk to Karen about something?" The woman laughed. "Then you need to hurry up," she said, glancing at her watch. Karen had already stopped by the store today and bought the essentials. There's no point in talking to her after lunch. The woman continued to laugh. Stacy walked out of the store and got into her car. She found the right house and looked closely at the dilapidated wooden house with the address on it. At first glance, the house looked abandoned, but Stacy saw signs that people lived there. There was a table in the yard with a few pickles and dirty plates on it. There were empty liquor bottles under the table. Also, there were some once tattered sweaters hanging on a clothesline and a bedsheet that had once been white but now was almost gray. Stacy couldn't find a bell, so she knocked on the shabby gate. But naturally, no one came out to meet her. "Karen," Stacy shouted, looking around. She started to understand why Frank didn't want to introduce her to his parents. "Karen, are you home?" the girl shouted again. "Who's there?" a sullen, disgruntled voice sounded. "I'm busy right now. Go away." The landlady came from around the corner of the house. It was difficult to tell how old Karen was. She saw a hunched, skinny woman with long arms, a puffy face, and a red nose, wearing a dirty, rag dress and old shoes. "What do you want?" "I won't pay for the electricity. I don't have any money. I've already mentioned that. Cut the wires if you want. I don't have a TV, phone, or vacuum cleaner anyway," Karen shouted. A girl of about 12 years old appeared from somewhere and asked, "Please, don't cut off the electricity." "Mom, how am I going to charge my phone?" "What phone?" "The one Frank gave you. You don't need it. All you do is complain about us and gossip about your family. Give it back to me now. Helen, give me the damn phone right now." The woman reached for the girl, trying to snatch the old smartphone from her. But the girl hid it behind her back and ran away from her mother. "I won't give it to you. You'll sell it and buy some booze, just like you sold my jacket that Frank brought me, and my new boots, and even my school uniform. When I grow up, I'm going to live with Frank, to be away from you. I'm so tired of living with you." The girl shouted and ran out of the yard with tears in her eyes. Karen tried to catch up with her daughter, but she was already drunk. So she staggered and almost fell to the ground. Swearing, she looked questioningly at Stacy. "Sorry for bothering you," Stacy said and ran after the girl, thinking she would be a more adequate interlocutor than her drunken mother. "Helen, wait. I want to talk to you. Please. Where are you going?" Stacy managed to catch up with the girl, who was about to turn onto a narrow path that was overgrown with tall grass. "I was running to the lake," the girl replied. "It's nice there now. You should better park your car far away from my house. Otherwise, my mother's gonna start taking it apart for spare parts." "Come with me," Stacy suggested. The girl agreed. They stopped by the store where Stacy bought several packages of cookies, sausage, some chocolates, and ice cream. "It's for you," Stacy said, giving her a bag. "Sorry, there wasn't anything else in the store. Thanks. Now tell me why you came to this hellhole." Stacy couldn't find the right words. Everything she was going to say now seemed ridiculous to her. Everything turned out to be completely different from what she had imagined. Her future husband's family wasn't just poor. Things were more complicated than that. "Why don't you say anything? You didn't just come here to give me cookies." "Who are you?" the girl asked, staring intently at the girl with green eyes. "My name is Stacy. I'm Frank's fiancé," the girl replied with a heavy sigh. I came to meet his family because we're getting married in a month, and he won't introduce me to his parents. I thought he was just embarrassed that I was from a wealthy family, and he came from a small town and wasn't Richard. Well, the girl laughed while finishing her ice cream. You drove all this way to meet our mother. You have to get there early in the morning while she's sober. But you know, you shouldn't have come here. Frank was just trying to protect you from our family. A girl from a decent family wouldn't like it. If you entered our house, you'd be shocked. Mother sold almost everything to buy alcohol. Helen said, "How do you know I'm from a decent family?" Stacy asked quietly. "You said yourself that you're from a wealthy family. Besides, you're wearing nice clothes. You have an expensive car. And you even have a nice manicure." Helen concluded. The girl looked at her dirty nails and hid her hands behind her back. "I can tell you about our family if you want. Frank won't tell you that he's not just embarrassed. He hates them all for living that way, and for ruining his life and the life of our brother Nick," the girl said, sitting on the shore of the lake. "Our mother had 4 children: Samantha, Frank, Nick, and me. The oldest sister, Samantha, got married at the age of 16. She and her husband already have 2 children, and now she is pregnant again. Her husband is a heavy drinker. Samantha also likes to drink alcohol, so they quarrel and reconcile, fight and kiss. The guardianship representatives even wanted to take the children to an orphanage. They gave Samantha a final warning. After that, she cleaned the house and bathed the children. Of course, she doesn't drink as much as our mother, and at least she cooks every day, and they even have a vegetable garden. But as soon as her husband gets his paycheck, they buy alcohol. They come to our house and party all weekend. When they run out of money, they start acting like normal people and wait for the next paycheck. When her husband brings home the money, Samantha takes half of it to her neighbor, and they use the rest to buy alcohol. Her husband doesn't know that Samantha is hiding some money at the neighbor's house. She uses this money to pay the bills and buy groceries. She is not a bad woman. That's why her children were not taken to the orphanage. But my mother is different. She always finds money to buy alcohol. She can't give it up anymore. Everything Frank used to bring home, she traded for bottles. Even my and Nick's clothes. She'd sell everything and buy another bottle. Frank doesn't bring anything here now. He stopped coming at all. The last time he was here, he brought me school uniforms and a warm coat. I hide them at my friend's house so that my mother doesn't sell them. Frank also gave me a bank card and sends me some money for food, because my mother rarely cooks and Samantha only cooks for her children. So I buy pasta, sausage, and sometimes cookies from the store. Does your mother live alone? And where is your other brother, Nick? Did he leave this town too, like Frank?" Stacy asked. "No, he hasn't left," the girl said, looking at Stacy with a very different, adult look. "He didn't have time to leave. That's why Frank stopped communicating with Mom. Mother had a lover, Bobby. He was a disgusting person. When he was drunk, he fought with everyone all the time. At the time, Frank had just moved to the city and was enrolled in college. And Nick was finishing school and was supposed to go to Frank the next year. They weren't just brothers, they were best friends," the girl said with a heavy sigh. "Frank used to visit us every weekend, but that week he couldn't make it. The bus to our small town was cancelled due to bad weather. It was just before Christmas. Bobby got drunk as usual and started threatening Mom with a knife. Nick tried to protect her, but Bobby stabbed him in the stomach, and by the time the ambulance arrived, Nick already died. Frank has never forgiven himself for not coming that day. He believes that Nick died because of him. The last time Frank entered our house was at Nick's funeral. He helped the police find Bobby, who was hiding in the attic of an abandoned house, and our mother knew where he was hiding and brought him food there. I remember him yelling at our mother, telling her that Bobby was the reason her son was dead. It was really scary," the girl said, lowering her eyes. "I was just a kid then, But I was always very afraid of Bobby. After that, Frank said that if our mother brought any other man into the house, he would send him to jail too. At the local store, he said he would send to jail anyone who entered our house. He said he had many friends in the city who would help with that. No one knew if Frank was telling the truth, but everyone knew Bobby was in jail. Now I realize it was just the words of an angry guy, but all the locals believed it. So all of Mother's friends stopped coming to our house. She usually drinks with her friends somewhere else, and she only drinks at home with Samantha and her husband, or with our neighbor Kate. No strangers show up at our house. Frank said that so nothing would happen to you. Is that why he forbade your mother to bring men into the house? Stacy asked quietly. Yes, he said he couldn't take me to the city yet. My brother said he has a lot of work right now, and he doesn't have time to take care of me, and his fiancé might not understand him. Helen glanced at her interlocutor and smiled slyly. I'm going to finish school and go to college. Frank said he'd help me get into college and move to the city. Thank you for telling me everything, Stacy said. She looked at the lake and froze for a second, saying, it's so beautiful here. So calm and peaceful. Yes, peaceful. But people keep leaving this place. The town is dying slowly. It's almost impossible to find a job here, Helen sighed. When you return to the city, hug Frank for me. What grade are you in now? Stacy suddenly asked the girl. Now I'm in 8th grade. 2 years left, and then I can finally get out of this place. I'll never drink alcohol in my life, a frustrated Helen suddenly said, and Stacy shuddered. She couldn't even imagine how much hardship this poor skinny girl with green eyes endured. Stacy was coming home in a completely different mood, and with completely different thoughts in her head. Now she realized why Frank didn't want to introduce her to his parents. Why he didn't drink alcohol at all. He couldn't even stand the smell of alcohol and the people who drank too much. There was only one thing she couldn't understand: how Frank could abandon his little sister in that house, because it was very hard for her to live with such a mother. On the way, Stacy stopped by her parents' house and confidently told them, Mom, Dad, I've changed my mind. I don't want a fancy wedding, sweetheart, but I told you I'll pay for everything myself. Frank doesn't have to worry about money. I'll pay for any wedding you want. You want me to be happy, right? Stacy asked her father. Then there's no need to do that. Frank is very prideful. He's not gonna let you pay for our wedding. Besides, I suddenly realized that a white dress and a restaurant are not the most important things in my life. What's more important is peace of mind and mutual trust in my family. Okay, whatever you say, a man said with a frown. After all, it's your wedding. Then maybe we can help you buy a house, Stephanie asked. We can give you the money as a gift, and you can buy a house. Yes, I think it's a good idea. The girl agreed, thinking about something. The wedding day was approaching. Stacy was constantly sad and aloof. Stacy, did you change your mind about marrying me? Frank asked with a smile, hugging his future wife. Is something wrong? Tell me. No, I haven't changed my mind, but I want you to invite someone to our wedding, the girl said in a mysterious voice. Who? Frank asked with a suspicious squint. My mother can't come. She's busy. I don't want to see your mother, Stacy said confidently. Our meeting convinced me that we shouldn't invite her, but I'd like to invite your sister, Helen. How do you know about Helen? Frank asked in confusion. I have to tell you something. And Stacy told her future husband about her trip to the small town and meeting his relatives. Frank and Stacy didn't throw a lavish wedding party. They registered their marriage in the registry office and celebrated the event in a small restaurant. They invited only the nearest and dearest people to the dinner. The bride's best friend with her husband, 2 friends of the groom, Stacy's parents, and Helen, who recently moved here from a small town. The dinner was fun. Everyone had a good time and took beautiful photos. A few days later, Stacy took Helen shopping. They bought everything for the new academic year, which Helen would spend with them. Frank filed for custody of his sister and took her away from her mother, who didn't even try to stop him before Christmas. Frank took his girls to the cemetery. "I've never been to Nick's grave," he said quietly as he found his brother's grave. "I can't forgive myself for not being able to protect him that day. It wasn't your fault. I guess it was meant to be," Stacy muttered, hugging her husband. The girls stood beside Frank in front of the grave. There was a picture of a young handsome guy who looked a lot like his brother. He had a kind smile too. "Let's go to the car and wait for him there. He needs to spend some time with his brother," Stacy said, taking Helen to the car. It was very quiet in the cemetery today. There was a young guy sitting by an abandoned grave. The cold wind was blowing right in his face, but he didn't seem to notice it. Today he managed to forgive himself, and life went on.